The camera was already rolling when it happened. There was no way to predict it, no way to stop it. The lens, an unblinking mechanical eye, captured the exact instant reality fractured for 3 individuals. 3 biologists, their backpacks heavy with science and expectation, entered the Cayambe-Coca Ecological Reserve on March 14, 2019. They carried enough supplies for 2 weeks of fieldwork: food, navigation equipment, satellite radios, and, most critically, 3 scientific documentation cameras programmed to record every step, every discovery, a continuous, unforgiving record. 7 days later, silence. Only one of the cameras was ever found. It was hanging inexplicably from a twisted tree branch at an elevation of roughly 7,900 feet. It swayed like a macabre pendulum in a cold wind that seemed to carry whispers. The memory card, a tiny sliver of silicon, was intact. The battery, dead exactly 18 minutes before its discovery, had held on to its final breath of power. The screen, webbed with fine cracks, suggested violent pressure, an impact that didn't shatter the surface but violated it. When the rescue team, hands shaking, played back the footage, they found 96 hours of routine, technical conversations, sample collection, long hikes through dense forest. And then, in the final file, something that should not have existed. The 3 biologists, standing still, in a clearing that appeared on no map, completely motionless. For 7 minutes and 42 seconds, none of them moved. They didn't blink. There was no visible breathing. The camera kept recording, but the audio was nothing but rising static. At 7:43, movement. All 3 turned their heads at the same time. They looked directly into the camera. Their expressions were identical, empty. Then they simply walked out of frame, together. No rush, no hesitation. The recording continued for another 11 minutes. The clearing stood empty. Absolute silence. Then the battery died. No one ever saw them again. No bodies, no trail, no explanation. But the camera recorded everything, and what it recorded left a void. If you're here looking for answers about what happened in that reserve, prepare yourself. This story offers no comfort, no clean resolution. Before we dive into the inexplicable, take a moment now to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear will stay with you for days. And after you watch until the end, leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to know who has the courage to make it through this investigation. Who dares to face the void? The Cayambe-Coca Ecological Reserve, a natural colossus in northeastern Ecuador, spans more than 1 million acres, encompassing Andean forest, Paramo, and the edge of the Amazon rainforest. Elevations range from about 2,000 to nearly 19,000 feet. Temperatures can plunge from 68 degrees to below freezing within hours. Fog is constant. Rain is unpredictable. The terrain is a brutal labyrinth where GPS coordinates fail without warning, swallowing signals and, at times, people. It is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet, and paradoxically, one of the most hostile. In March 2019, 3 researchers from the University of San Francisco de Quito received authorization for an expedition to catalog endemic species. Dr. Mateo Villarreal, 34, botanist; Dr. Camila Ortega, 29, entomologist; and Lucas Mendoza, 26, research assistant and biologist. They entered through the Papalacta Trail on March 14th at 6:47 a.m. They carried supplies for 15 days, satellite communication equipment, and 3 GoPro Hero 7 cameras set to continuous recording. The plan was to establish a base camp at roughly 6,900 feet, conduct daily surveys, and return on March 28th. On March 21st, all contact stopped. The final satellite radio transmission came at 6:33 p.m. on March 20th. Mateo Villarreal reported normal conditions. He said they would make a longer push northeast the following day, into a transition zone, and return to base camp before nightfall. They never did. When the rescue team reached the base camp on March 23rd, the tents were intact. Food was stored, equipment neatly arranged. There were no signs of a hurried departure. But 3 backpacks were missing. So were the sample kits, the handheld radio, and all 3 cameras. The search lasted 17 days. And then, on the 17th day, a tracker found the camera. The camera was found 7 miles from the base camp, in a direction that did not appear in any of the route plans provided by Mateo Villarreal. It was a considerable distance, crossed through treacherous terrain where every step demanded effort and experience. The camera was hanging from a twisted branch of a polylepis tree, exactly 10 feet above the ground, secured by its safety strap. The branch was not broken. There were no signs of a fall or forced impact. The strap wasn't torn or frayed. Someone, or something, had placed the camera there with deliberate, almost ritualistic precision. The tracker who found it, Javier Solano, a mountain guide with more than 2 decades of experience in the Cayambe Coca Ecological Reserve, described the site with a strained voice even months later. "Too quiet," he kept telling investigators. There were no birds, no insects, just the wind cutting through dry leaves. But there was more. A cold that didn't come from altitude. Javier described it as a cold that rose from the ground, entered through your feet and climbed your spine. The air felt heavier, almost viscous, as if breathing required conscious effort. And the smell, or rather, the absence of it. There was no scent of damp earth, no decaying vegetation, no tree resin, just an olfactory void, as if the air itself had been sterilized. When Javier reached up to remove the camera, he felt something strange on the cracked screen. The microfractures radiated outward from a central point, forming an almost perfect web. When he ran his finger across them, he realized the cracks were warm, not lukewarm, hot, as if something had pressed against the screen with intense heat, leaving behind a thermal imprint that lingered for hours, perhaps days. The battery was fully drained, the tiny status LED dark, a final punctuation mark on its ability to record. The memory card was recovered with extreme care and delivered to the Ecuadorian police forensic lab. The first 96 hours of footage revealed the expedition's daily life with brutal clarity. Mateo, Camila, and Lucas going about their sampling routines, documenting flora and fauna. Occasional laughter punctuated technical discussions about endemic species. The sound of rain hitting tent fabric, the crackle of a campfire, boots grinding into wet trail. Camilla's voice, vibrant, describing a new variety of iridescent beetle, its colors shimmering beneath filtered forest light. Mateo patiently explaining to Lucas the complex morphology of a rare orchid, his fingers pointing out microscopic details. Everything normal, everything expected from a scientific expedition, a record of life, of science, of human presence. Until the final file. The file, labeled Go Pro 47 MP4, ran for 18 minutes and 53 seconds. It opened with a shaky image, as if the camera had been activated and quickly fixed in place, perhaps clipped to a backpack strap or an improvised branch mount. After a few seconds, the image stabilized, revealing a clearing that appeared on none of the reserve's maps, not even the most detailed or up-to-date ones. There were no visible trails leading to it. The surrounding vegetation was dense, nearly impenetrable, trees with closed canopies and thorny shrubs forming a natural barrier. The ground was hard-packed earth, unnaturally free of leaves, branches, or debris, as if it were constantly swept by an invisible force, a geometric anomaly in the chaos of the forest. The light filtering through the canopy was diffuse, but there was something wrong with it, almost gray, as if sunlight had passed through an unseen layer of smoke. At the center of the clearing stood the 3 biologists. They were standing still, side by side, facing the camera. Mateo Villarreal, Camila Ortega, Lucas Mendoza. Motionless. There was no movement, no speech. The camera captured ambient sound, but it was wrong. A low hum, barely audible at first, grew steadily louder, blending with subtle static, an electronic hiss that seemed to originate from inside the recording itself. It wasn't the sound of the forest. It wasn't wind. It felt corrosive, a sound imposed on silence, vibrating in the teeth of anyone wearing headphones. Their eyes were open, fixed, but unfocused. Their faces were empty, as if sculpted from wax, lifelike, but without spark or soul. Their bodies were upright, yet their posture wasn't alert or relaxed. It was suspended, interrupted, as if they had been paused mid-action, frozen in a moment that would never complete. Their skin appeared pale, almost translucent in the strange light, and their clothes, though dirtied by travel, were oddly intact, lacking the tears and stains expected after days in such terrain. 7 minutes and 42 seconds. That was how long the stillness lasted. Each second stretched into an eternity of absence. The static intensified, becoming a high-pitched whine that scraped at the ears, a sonic torture amplifying the visual unease. At times, the image seemed to vibrate, a barely perceptible distortion, as if reality itself were being pulled taut. The outlines of their bodies blurred for milliseconds at a time, an optical illusion or a recording failure no one could explain. Then, at 7:43, movement. But before that, one detail. A detail forensic analysts only noticed after watching the footage frame by frame more than 20 times. At 7:42, exactly 1 second before the synchronized motion, Lucas Mendoza blinked. Only him. A slow, deliberate blink, as if it were the last act of free will. Then his eyes opened again, now as empty as Mateo's and Camilla's. What followed was not human movement. All three turned their heads at the exact same time. Perfect synchronization, mechanical, like interlocking gears. They looked directly into the camera. Their eyes were hollow, completely hollow, no recognition, no fear, nothing. Just the dull darkness of dilated pupils reflecting the lens like black mirrors. The static peaked, deafening white noise that seemed to tear through the air, blocking thought, blocking comprehension. They didn't speak. They didn't make a sound. They just stared. For 3 seconds, that felt endless. The image seemed frozen, though the recording continued. Time itself felt stretched, the scene suspended in a vacuum, tension rising to an unbearable point. Then, without warning, without transition, they simply walked out of frame. They didn't run. They didn't hurry. They moved together, in unison, to the right side of the screen. One step, then another, and they vanished into the dense vegetation, swallowed by shadow. There was no sound of snapping branches, no rustling leaves, only silence. The camera kept recording. The clearing was empty. The piercing static faded gradually, returning to the low hum. The forest's silence, previously absent, now felt heavier, deeper, as if the biologist's disappearance had created a vacuum. Their absence wasn't just physical, it erased any trace of their presence. The soil remained untouched. No footprints, no crushed leaves, nothing. As if they had never been there at all. The recording continued for another 11 minutes. The empty clearing, the hum, the static, until the screen went black. The GoPro's battery finally died, ending the record of something that defied logic. If you're feeling the same discomfort Javier Solano felt when he found that camera, if you felt the cold crawl up your spine, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, and whether you'd have the courage to touch that camera. The discovery of the camera and the playback of the file, GoPro 047.mp4, did not bring clarity. It caused a collapse. The investigation team, made up of Ecuadorian national police officers, search and rescue specialists, and forensic experts, was confronted with evidence that fit no existing protocol. When the first investigators finished watching the video, the room remained in absolute silence for nearly 10 minutes. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the emptiness captured on screen had leaked into the space itself. Captain Rodrigo Salazar, a 20-year veteran of the Ecuadorian police and leader of the search operation, later described the experience as watching something that should not exist. He reported suffering recurring nightmares for weeks after viewing the footage. Always the same dream. He was standing in the clearing, unable to move, feeling something press against his head, forcing him to turn and look at a camera that wasn't there. He would wake up drenched in sweat, with the overwhelming sense that he had forgotten something essential, but could never remember what. The first step was an exhaustive sweep of the area where the camera had been found and of the clearing seen in the video. Javier Solano, the guide who located the GoPro, was brought back to the exact spot. He described the location with obsessive precision. But the clearing simply did not exist. Equipped with high-precision GPS units and up-to-date satellite imagery, the search teams combed every square foot within a 3-mile radius of the camera's location. The vegetation was dense and uninterrupted. There were no openings, no patches of bare ground. Nothing that matched what appeared in the footage. On the 4th day of expanded searches, hope briefly surfaced. One of the tracking dogs, a German shepherd named Thor, began barking frantically in an area about 2 miles from where the camera had been found. The team rushed in. Thor had uncovered something buried beneath a thin layer of leaves and soil, a hiking boot. The boot matched the brand Lucas Mendoza wore, and the size was consistent. Dried mud clung to the sole and the laces were tied neatly, as if the boot had been removed carefully, not torn off in panic. The discovery triggered a surge of activity. The area was secured. Forensic teams analyzed the surrounding soil, but there were no footprints, no signs of struggle. The boot stood upright, positioned deliberately among the leaves, as if someone had placed it there with care. Laboratory analysis revealed something even more disturbing. The mud on the sole did not match the soil where the boot was found. Its mineral composition was different, indicating the boot had been worn somewhere else before being left there. But where? No soil sample collected anywhere in the reserve matched it. There was more. Inside the boot, folded with precision, was a piece of paper. It was a torn page from Lucas's field notebook. The page contained notes on a species of moss dated March 19th. But at the bottom margin, written in handwriting that appeared to be Lucas's, though slightly unsteady, was a single sentence. "The silence has weight." The phrase made no sense in the context of scientific notes. And while the handwriting was similar, it carried an odd quality, as if written by someone with a numb hand or under extreme pressure. Handwriting analysis confirmed it was Lucas's, but could not determine his physical or emotional state at the time. The boot and the page were logged as evidence, but they led nowhere. There was nothing else in the area. Thor refused to continue working after the discovery. He became agitated, whined softly, and eventually lay down, trembling. His handler said he had never seen the dog react like that. Thor was removed from the operation and never used in searches again. He later developed an inexplicable fear of forests and refused to enter wooded areas of any kind. The missing GoPros, the other 2 cameras, became an obsession. The search for them intensified, expanding to a 12-mile radius, but nothing turned up. It was as if they had been erased from existence along with their owners. Forensic analysis of the recovered camera revealed more unsettling details. As Javier had suspected, the cracked screen was not the result of a fall. The pressure that caused the microfractures had been applied in a concentrated, almost surgical manner, directly at the center of the display. Laboratory tests estimated that roughly 100 pounds of pressure had been applied to an area smaller than half an inch. There were no fingerprints, no skin residue, no organic material to indicate who or what had touched it. The safety strap, though intact, showed microabrasions consistent with being pulled upward and secured to a branch, but without the force that would cause damage. It had been placed, not discarded. The audio from Go PR0047 MP4 was sent to an acoustics laboratory in Quito. The low hum and rising static were isolated and analyzed. They did not match any known environmental sounds. They were not typical electronic malfunctions associated with GoPro cameras. The static pattern did not correspond to radio interference or natural electromagnetic fields. It was anomalous, white noise that seemed to modulate itself, almost like an artificial frequency, but with no identifiable source. The specialists couldn't classify it. "It's as if the sound comes from a place that doesn't exist," said one of the technicians, Dr. Andres Moreno, his voice edged with visible discomfort. He added, almost in a whisper, "When I isolated the frequency and played it on a loop, I started to feel pressure in my head. I had to stop. It felt like if I kept listening, something inside me would empty out." The GPS data from the biologists' backpacks, meant to record their movements continuously, was incomplete. Mateo Villarreal's last recorded position placed him about 5.5 miles northeast of base camp, exactly as he had reported in his final transmission. After that point, the signal simply stopped. There were no further records. It was as if the device had been abruptly shut off, or had entered a zone where satellite technology was ineffective, yet the area was not known for such anomalies. Technicians from the GPS manufacturer reviewed the data and confirmed there was no equipment failure. The signal didn't degrade. It ceased. Personal belongings left at base camp were examined in detail. Field journals, books, clothing, toiletries. Nothing was out of place. Nothing suggested panic, conflict, or a voluntary departure. The tents were orderly, sleeping bags rolled, food stored in sealed containers. It was the image of a camp meant to be returned to, not abandoned. But one detail stood out. Camilla's tent carried a sweet, almost cloying odor that none of the investigators could identify. It wasn't perfume. It wasn't food. It was organic, but not the smell of decay. It was floral, yet from flowers that did not grow in the region. The scent faded after 3 days, leaving no trace. The families of the biologists were interviewed extensively. Parents, siblings, colleagues, nothing surfaced. No personal crises, no professional issues, nothing that suggested a voluntary disappearance. Mateo was deeply committed to his research. Camila was passionate about her work. Lucas was a promising young scientist. They all had plans, futures. Lucas's mother, Elena Mendoza, a deeply religious woman, said something that stayed with the investigators. "My son didn't leave. He was taken. I feel he's somewhere he can't scream, can't cry. He just is." The investigation dragged on for months. Reports were filed, theories proposed and discarded. A wild animal attack? Unlikely, given the lack of evidence and the nature of the video. An accident? No bodies, no trace. Kidnapping? No ransom demands. No contact. The video, Go PR 0047. MP4 became the center of everything. The image of the 3 biologists standing motionless, empty, staring into the camera before walking away, refused to be understood. That look, that synchronization. Lucas's blink, the final flicker of humanity before the void. Exhausted, the investigation team was forced to archive the case as an inexplicable disappearance in December 2019. A classification that was, in itself, an admission of failure. If you're feeling the weight of an investigation that led nowhere, if the carefully positioned boot sent a chill through you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, and what you think the phrase "the silence has weight" truly means. Among the belongings left behind at the base camp, Camila Ortega's field journal was the most revealing. Written in elegant, precise handwriting, it detailed the entomologist's scientific observations, but it also contained personal notes, reflections on the beauty of the forest and the psychological strain of fieldwork. Dr. Elias Vargas, a retired ethnobotanist from the University of San Francisco de Quito, and Mateo Villarreal's former mentor, was among the first to gain access to the complete diary. He spent weeks bent over its pages, rereading every word, searching for clues the official investigation had overlooked. Vargas was a man of old wisdom and a piercing gaze, but after watching the video, Go Par 047 to NMP4, and reading Camilla's journal, something in him changed. He developed insomnia. He spent entire nights awake in his office, surrounded by maps of Cayambe Coca, handwritten notes and photographs of the 3 biologists. His wife said that during the few hours he managed to sleep, he murmured the same phrase over and over. They didn't leave. They were emptied. Camilla's diary began normally. Entries dated March 14th through March 18th described the journey, the discoveries, the team's excitement. But starting on March 18th, the tone began to shift, subtly at first. March 18th. Today we found an area of anomalous vegetation, about 4 miles from camp. The orchids Mateo has been searching for were there, but in a way that felt wrong. The colors were more intense, almost too vivid, a purple so deep it seemed to pulse. The petals had a velvety texture, but when I touched them, I felt a faint vibration, as if the plant were alive in a way I can't describe scientifically. This isn't a known mutation. I collected samples, but when I placed them in the preservation bag, they released a sweet, almost nauseating odor that clung to the back of my throat. Lucas felt slightly unwell and blamed the thin air. I felt something else, a strange stillness. The forest sound seemed muffled there, as if we were under an invisible dome. I sketched one of the orchids in my notebook. I'll review it tomorrow. March 19th. We returned to the area. Mateo is fascinated by the orchids. He spent hours photographing, measuring, documenting. But there's something in his eyes that worries me. A fixation that goes beyond scientific curiosity. He talked about feeling the presence of more rare species nearby, but can't explain how he knows. Lucas is quieter than usual. He told me he had a strange dream last night. He was standing in a clearing, being watched by something, and when he tried to move, he couldn't. I had a similar dream. I didn't tell him. The stillness is deeper now. The hum. I've started hearing a low, constant hum, almost imperceptible but always there. It's not an insect. It's not the wind. It feels like it's coming from the ground or from inside my own head. It vibrates in my teeth when I focus on it. Mateo says it's fatigue. I know it isn't. I reviewed the orchid drawing I made yesterday. The petals, they seem to have changed position on the page. I know that's impossible. But they've opened more, as if the flower is blooming in the drawing. March 20th. The hum is louder. Mateo and Lucas hear it now too. Mateo doesn't seem worried. If anything, he seems drawn to it. He says the sound means something, that we need to follow it. Lucas agrees, but his expression is distant, like he's just repeating Mateo's words without thinking. I don't want to follow the sound. I feel a cold run down my spine every time I hear it. But they're different. This isn't a discussion. It's a decision that's already been made without me. I feel like I'm being pulled, not physically but mentally. The forest is silent. I haven't heard a single bird today. No insects, just the hum. Mateo insists we go deeper tomorrow, northeast, toward a clearing he says he can feel. It's not on the map. He can't explain how he knows. He just says, we have to go, that it's calling us. I tried to argue, but my voice sounded weak, unconvincing. It's like part of me wants to go too, even though I know I shouldn't. The hum is the only thing left. Everything else is being erased. March 21st, last entry written in the morning. We're leaving now. Mateo is euphoric. Lucas is silent. I'm afraid, a fear I can't name. The hum is so loud I can barely think. I feel that if we go to that clearing, something irreversible will happen. But I can't resist. It's like my free will is dissolving, being replaced by the need to go, to see, to surrender. The air feels heavy. Breathing is difficult. I'm writing this as a record in case we don't return. If someone finds this diary, Know that we didn't go by choice. We were called. And the call has weight. Silence has weight. And we are being crushed by it. The final sentence was written in a trembling hand, the letters nearly illegible, as if Camilla were fighting to maintain control. Vargas read these entries hundreds of times. The progression was undeniable, from unease to the complete loss of autonomy. The mention of the orchid drawing that had changed disturbed him the most. He requested the original notebook. When it arrived, he immediately turned to the sketch. The orchid was rendered with scientific precision, but the petals, just as Camilla had written, appeared fully open, something that didn't match her initial description of a budding flower. Vargas photographed the drawing and compared it to the orchid samples collected in the area, which had been found at the base camp. The samples were wilted, dead, as expected after days without proper preservation. But when he looked back at the drawing days later, he had the distinct impression that the petals were slightly more closed than before. He dismissed it as an optical illusion. The discomfort remained. Vargas began to form his theory. He believed the biologists had not disappeared in the conventional sense. They had been absorbed by an anomaly that manifested through absence, the absence of sound, the absence of animal life, the absence of free will. The clearing was not a permanent physical location, but a collapse point, a temporary rupture where reality became porous. "It's not a portal," Vargas told anyone who would listen, his voice hoarse from obsession. "It's not another dimension, it's a distortion. A place where reality becomes permeable, and whatever is there doesn't take things away, it empties them, it renders them null." Camilla described it perfectly. Silence has weight. It's not the absence of sound. It's the presence of a void that presses down, that crushes identity, will, existence itself. He pointed to the biologist's immobility in the video. They're not afraid. They're not confused. They're empty. That look, that's the look of someone who's been stripped of their essence. Lucas's blink was the last remnant of humanity. After that, nothing. The synchronized movement, the lack of any human reaction. This isn't possession, it's erasure. Vargas began to suffer from auditory hallucinations. He heard the hum, low, constant, vibrating in his teeth. His colleagues noticed the change. He lost weight. His eyes sank into dark circles. He became obsessed, not just with understanding what happened, but with proving that Mateo, Camila, and Lucas hadn't simply died or gotten lost. They had been violated at a fundamental level. Camila's diary was the bridge, the record of a scientific mind struggling against a force that defied science and losing. If Camila's diary sent chills down your spine, if you feel like you shouldn't be reading these words, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, and whether you've ever felt something calling you toward a place you knew you shouldn't go. Dr. Elias Vargas's obsession pushed him beyond the case of the three biologists. He plunged into historical archives, local accounts, and indigenous legends, searching for patterns, echoes of the inexplicable. What he uncovered was deeply unsettling. The disappearance of Mateo, Camila, and Lucas was not an isolated event. The Cayambe Coca Ecological Reserve and its surrounding regions had been the stage for a series of unexplained vanishings over decades, sometimes centuries. They were not frequent, but they were recurrent, and all shared disturbing similarities. Vargas focused on two cases he considered the most relevant, the most brutally similar to the events of 2019. Case 1. The Surveyors of 1978. In June 1978, a group of 5 surveyors hired by a hydroelectric company disappeared while mapping a remote area of the reserve. They were working in a transition zone between Paramo and Cloud Forest at roughly 7,500 feet of elevation. Their last radio contact was on June 18th at 4:20 p.m. The team leader, engineer Carlos Ruiz, reported they had found a topographical anomaly not shown on preliminary maps. A circular depression about 160 feet in diameter, where vegetation was sparse and the ground consisted of hard-packed earth. 3 days later, when a support team was dispatched to investigate the loss of contact, they found the surveyors' camp abandoned. But there were no signs of a hurried escape. The tents were still standing, food remained stored, and at the center of the camp the surveying equipment, theodolites, levels, tripods, had been arranged in a perfect circle, not thrown, not stacked, placed with geometric precision, each instrument pointing toward the center. In the middle of the circle, the 5 handheld radios were stacked one on top of another, forming a small tower. All of them were turned on, transmitting nothing but a constant hiss, identical to the hum heard in the biologist's 2019 video. The batteries lasted 2 more days before dying. The topographical anomaly Carlos Ruiz mentioned was never found. Search teams combed the area for weeks. There was no circular depression, no clearing. The terrain was uniform, swallowed by dense vegetation. The bodies of the 5 surveyors were never recovered. The case was archived as a disappearance under unknown circumstances, but Vargas uncovered a detail the official investigation had ignored. One member of the search team, a young local guide named Esteban Lara, reported feeling pressure in his head and hearing a hum that vibrated in his bones when he approached the area where the camp had been found. He refused to continue the search and never returned to that part of the reserve. Case 2. The Morales family, 1993. In August 1993, the Morales family, father, mother, and 2 young children, vanished from their small farm on the edge of the reserve. They were recent settlers, trying to build a life growing potatoes and raising chickens. The farm was isolated, about 9 miles from the nearest village. A neighbor passing by the property on August 22nd found the house empty. The front door stood open. The table was set for lunch. Food sat cold on the plates but hadn't spoiled, suggesting it had been served only hours earlier. Work tools were neatly stacked beside a fire pit that was still warm. Clothes hung on the line, drying in the sun. The most disturbing discovery was the family dog, a German shepherd named Capitan, found tied to a tree a few yards from the house. He was dead, not from injuries, but from starvation and dehydration. The rope binding him was intact, showing no signs he had tried to escape. His eyes were open, fixed on an empty point ahead, his mouth slightly open, tongue dry and cracked. The veterinarian estimated Capitan had died after 3 to 4 days without food or water. What made it unbearable was the posture. The dog was sitting upright, alert, completely motionless. There were no signs of struggle, no panic, no attempt to flee. It was as if he had simply been switched off. The Morales family was never found. No bodies, no trace. The farm was abandoned, and over time, the forest reclaimed it. Vargas visited the site in 2020, more than 25 years later. The house was in ruins, consumed by vegetation, but he felt it immediately, a cold that had nothing to do with the weather, a silence that was more than the absence of sound. It was a presence. He stayed only 15 minutes before a growing pressure in his head forced him to leave. Back at his car, he realized his hands were shaking. The Zone of Silence and Quechua Legends Vargas mapped the locations of the disappearances. The surveyor's camp in 1978, the Morales farm in 1993, the spot where the biologist's camera was found in 2019, and the final GPS point recorded from Mateo Villarreal's equipment. When he plotted them together, a pattern emerged. All points fell within a specific irregular area, roughly 30 square miles in the northeastern portion of the reserve. With the help of a local linguist, Dr. Javier Quispe, a specialist in Quechua culture, Vargas learned that ancient indigenous maps, passed down orally for generations, identified this area as Llana Upa, Black Silence, or Zone of Silence. It was not a place for hunting or gathering. It was a place to avoid. Quechua legends spoke of Supai Wasi, the house of the spirit, a place where time and space warped. Elders described Llana Upa as a place where sound dies, where will dissolves, and where those who enter are emptied of their shadow, a Quechua metaphor for the soul or vital essence. Those who were emptied, if ever seen again, which was rare, did not recognize their own names, did not speak, and moved mechanically, like flesh dolls with no spirit inside. There was a protection ritual performed before approaching Yana Upa, burning guanto leaves and carrying an amulet of volcanic stone. Even with protection, entering the zone was strongly discouraged. Those who enter do not return, and if they do, they are no longer who they were, said one ancient proverb. Vargas interviewed one of the last Quechua Yachak, shamans, of the region, an elderly man in his 80s known as Taita Miguel. He confirmed the legends. Yana Upa, he said, was a tear in the world, a place where what is below rises and what is above sinks. He described the hum as the breath of the tear and the clearing as the mouth that swallows without chewing. When Vargas showed Taita Miguel a printed frame from the video, the three biologists standing motionless in the clearing, the old man went pale. He touched the photo with trembling fingers and whispered, "Yana Nyawi, black eyes, they have already been eaten. What's in this picture is no longer people. They are shells." Taita Miguel refused to say more. He burned the photo in a small fire and performed a cleansing ritual, murmuring prayers in Quechua. Before Vargas left, the shaman issued a warning. Do not try to understand Yana Upa. Do not try to explain it. Those who try to explain it are called, and those who are called, go. Vargas left the encounter shaken to his core, but his obsession was stronger than his fear. The official investigation had ended, the case was archived, but Dr. Elias Vargas, consumed by obsession, continued. He was no longer trying only to understand what had happened to Mateo, Camilla, and Lucas. He was trying to prove that the void was real, that Yana Upa was not a legend, but a tangible anomaly still active, still waiting. In 2022, Vargas found a recent case that confirmed his worst fears. The Patagonian Mountaineer, 2022. In March 2022, an experienced Chilean mountaineer named Martin Soto, 38, was climbing alone on Cerro Castillo, a remote mountain in Chilean Patagonia. Martin had over 15 years of experience in South American ranges and maintained regular satellite radio contact with his support team. On March 14th, exactly 3 years after the biologists entered Cayambe Coca, Martin transmitted a message at 2:30 p.m. His voice was calm, but he described a strange stillness on the mountain. No wind, no birds. He said he could hear a low hum coming from inside the rock itself. He reported discovering a fissure in the mountain face that did not appear on his route maps and admitted feeling an irresistible pull to explore it. The transmission cut off abruptly at 2:33 p.m. Rescue teams were mobilized immediately. They searched the area for 3 weeks. On the 10th day, they found Martin's backpack. It was hanging from a twisted tree branch, nearly 3 miles from where he should have been, and at a much lower elevation than his last known position. The backpack was intact. Inside was his climbing journal. The final entry, dated March 14th at 2:15 p.m., read, "I found the fissure. It shouldn't be here. It's not on the maps. But it's calling me. The hum is so loud I can barely think. I feel like if I go in, I'll find something. Or become something. I can't explain it. The silence around the fissure is absolute. I'm being emptied. I'm going in." There was no body, no trail, only the carefully placed backpack and the journal. When Vargas learned of the case through a contact in the South American mountaineering community, a chill ran through him. The similarities were undeniable. The hum, the irresistible attraction, the sensation of being emptied, the date, March 14th. It was as if Yana Upa, or whatever this anomaly truly was not confined to Cayambe Coca. It was something broader, manifesting in remote regions across Latin America. Vargas expanded his research. He uncovered similar reports in Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia, always in isolated areas, Always the same signature. Unnatural silence. The hum. No bodies. Personal objects left behind with deliberate care. While Vargas spiraled deeper into his work, the families of the biologists were left with a kind of grief that had no name. There were no bodies to bury, no certainty of death. Only absence. Lucas Mendoza's mother, Elena, never accepted that her son had died. She kept his bedroom exactly as it was before the expedition. Clothes in the closet, books on the shelves, the bed neatly made. She told anyone who would listen that she felt Lucas was stuck somewhere, not dead, but suspended. Every night at exactly 6:33 p.m., the time of Mateo's final transmission, she called Lucas's phone. The number was disconnected, but she listened to his voicemail greeting just to hear his voice say, "Leave your message." She never left one. She only listened, then hung up. Mateo Villarreal's father, Hernan, reacted differently. He burned everything that had been returned to him: books, clothes, photographs. He said he didn't want reminders of someone who had been erased. He refused to speak his son's name. When others mentioned Mateo, Hernan would leave the room. He developed severe heart problems and died in 2021, 2 years after the disappearance. At the funeral, Elena Mendoza was present. She whispered to someone nearby, "Hernan died of emptiness, the same emptiness that took our children." Camila Ortega's family tried to preserve her memory publicly. They created a scholarship in her name. They organized an annual remembrance ceremony. But the pain remained raw. Her sister Sophia said in a 2020 interview, "We don't know if we're mourning a death or an absence. It's like Camila was erased from reality. But the pain of her absence is still real. It still bleeds." The Cayambe Coca Ecological Reserve remains open, but the area known as Llana Upa, though never officially closed, is avoided. Local guides refuse to take tourists or researchers there. Scientific expeditions request alternate routes. There is an unspoken understanding that the zone is wrong. In 2023, a group of urban exploration YouTubers attempted to enter Llana Upa to investigate the legend. They live-streamed the first miles of their hike. Dense forest, nervous jokes, uneasy laughter. 47 minutes into the stream, the audio filled with static. One of them asked, "Do you guys hear that hum?" The stream cut abruptly. The group returned 2 hours later, pale, shaking. They refused to talk about what they had seen or felt. They deleted the video. They never spoke publicly about the incident again. Months later, a leaked private message from one of them surfaced online. It contained only one sentence: "If we'd stayed 5 more minutes, we wouldn't have come back. We wouldn't have died. We just wouldn't have come back." In October 2024, something happened that Vargas considered the final warning. A German tourist named Klaus Berger posted a photo on Reddit taken in Cayambe Coca. The image showed a scenic overlook, forest stretching to the horizon. But in the lower right corner of the photo, blurred almost imperceptible, was a patch of bare earth, a clearing. Users asked for the exact GPS coordinates. Klaus replied that he would check his data and post them shortly. He never did. 3 days later, his Reddit account was deleted. Vargas tracked down another post Klaus had made on a backpacking forum 2 days after the photo. Klaus wrote that he was feeling a strange pressure in his head and had been hearing a constant hum since returning from the hike. He added that he was considering going back to that clearing to take better photos. It was his last post. Vargas analyzed the image Klaus had shared, enlarging the blurred area. He couldn't be certain. But the circular shape, the exposed earth, the absence of vegetation, it looked disturbingly similar to the clearing from the 2019 video. The legacy of Mateo Villarreal, Camila Ortega, and Lucas Mendoza is not that of a successful scientific expedition. It is the legacy of an unwilling testimony, a record of a force that defies understanding. Their lives were not ended by accident or crime, but by an existential violation that removed them from the fabric of reality itself. The camera that recorded its own disappearance is more than evidence. It is a monument to absence. A reminder that there are places and forces that should not be explained, cannot be understood, and continue to operate in silence, waiting. The Cayambe Coca Ecological Reserve still stands. Vast, untouched, rivers still run, trees still grow. But for those who know the story, the forest's silence is no longer neutral. It carries the echo of the hum, the memory of the phantom clearing, and the permanence of absence. And the void remains, waiting, calling. Because Yana Upa did not disappear. It waits for the next person who hears the hum, feels the pull, and walks toward the clearing that does not exist on any map. And when that happens, there will be another camera, another recording, another testimony of a void that imposes itself. If you felt the weight of that absence, if curiosity pulls you forward while fear holds you back, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more stories that challenge logic and violate reality. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, and if you've ever heard the hum, ever felt the call of a place that shouldn't exist. Maybe it's better not to answer, because those who answer are heard, and those who are heard are called.